Well, it's wonderful to be here with you today, Luis. Wow, your burgeoning and brilliant body of work on all things leadership, personal development, organizational change, and more. And of course, your book, Ordinary Resilience: How Effective Leaders Adapt and Thrive, is a manual and a manifesto for all of us to use, learn from, experiment with, on a topic that actually has been often misunderstood, misrepresented, I think, in many quarters. Your book clearly provides us with rich thinking, deeply personal experiences, which are moving, motivating, and humbling, as well as some really practical advice that we can all use. It moved me genuinely to tears of joy, and also sadness at times. And for a repressed Brit, as some people might say, that takes quite a lot, because obviously we don't cry here in the UK. But hey, in all seriousness, a brilliant book. You're a brilliant person, and nurturing resilience in all of its shapes and form, and how we do that wisely in our day-to-day lives, is exactly the topic that we're going to cover today. But before we do, welcome to the show.
Well, David, thank you so much. I really appreciate your words, and it just made my day, my week, my month. And this is one of the reasons why I wrote the book, is because I want people to relate to the book itself. It's not necessarily about me, but it's to relate to it. So thank you for
pleasure, and very meaningful and very sincere on my part. Now, clearly, many of us, including myself, have come to resilience after a big life event, often a shock or a crisis. But I guess one of the main premise in your book is actually we need to do this day in, day out, when things perhaps seem okay. And you talk about creating a thriving mechanism to do so, which actually may sound counterintuitive, because many of us have worked in corporate environments in particular, or perhaps in our own mindsets as well, where we think, oh, resilience, that's a luxury, or we'll deal with that when we really need to. Whereas you actually say we need to get on it day to day. Tell me more about that.
Yeah. I think that as a human species, we are already the most resilient, species in the world. Resilience is within our DNA. And resilience is a word, and it can be, defined by many ways. The way I define resilience is the process of adapting and thriving. And not just surviving, but adapting and thriving, which is what we've been doing as a species since we started walking on 2 feet and, living out of the caves and going into houses. And so resilience is within our DNA. So that's number one. So I think that the big misconception is that, to your point earlier, that a lot of times we believe that we need to have some sort of like a holy moment to unlock the resilience, that we need to go through major changes in our life to unlock the resilience. And I said, no, we don't, because it is already ingrained with our DNA. All we need to do is unlock what we already have. So resilience is not just based on, it's not just for the people that run marathons, ultra marathons, or like
you
athletes or people that are going through hard times, but it's actually for everyone, and we have access to everything that we need right now, to take the first step.
I mean, I couldn't agree with you more. And obviously, I've drunk the Kool-Aid, read your book, and believe that. But if you were talking with one of your executive coaching clients, and he or she said, "You know what, life's been all right for me so far. Actually, I know others have had crises, but you know what, I'm okay." And actually doing that stuff that you're going to tell me to do, or encourage me to do, coach me to do, feels like a little bit of a distraction, and I need to sort of focus frontwards. How would you sell it to him or her?
Well, again, a lot of times, the resilience is a word that doesn't fit well with some individuals. To your point earlier, I don't know. I need to work. I need to do X. Resilience is a nice thing to have. So to tell you the truth, a lot of times I don't use the word resilience, but rather I use the word that motivates them. And a lot of times, people want influence and power. You see what I'm saying? So in order for you to have influence and power, you need to do that certain number of things that in my mind is hey, you need to do this because you build resilience. But in his mind, it's like, I need to get influence and power. You see, but so it's not about
Yes. Yes.
resilience. If you're looking for resilience, absolutely. But if you're looking for to adapt, to thrive, to be successful, the word that I use is resilience, but that is not necessarily the word that you might be using.
Yes, that's smart. That's why you're such a successful coach, framing it in the right way, using the right language, getting in tune with them.
Yeah.
Now, you use some beautiful and quite evocative phrases in the book. You talk about embracing the suck, which is all about how you react to the challenge and how you reframe it in your own mind. And I guess the question I have is that all sounds very sensible, plausible. But how do you do that when perhaps you are in one of those moments where you feel overwhelmed, out of control? How do you create the clarity of thought in order to embrace the suck, as you put
Well,
it?
so there are two things that I can think of. Number one is and in the book I call it radical acceptance, and the idea that, hey, this is where we are. This moment where we are is where we're meant to be. And
Yes,
accepting that is the first step. So looking back on my own experience, I mean, when I I had a lot of what I called, identity crisis, when I used to compare myself to the person that I was before the tumor. I was a professor, I was doing this, so I had a lot of things going well for me. And there was a moment where I just like, oh my God, I am a defective goods right now, pretty much. The minute I said, you know what, this is who I am now. And I cannot think of going back to that person that I was because that person doesn't exist anymore. This is who I am, tumor included. The minute I made that acceptance, then things started to open up. So that's number one, is acceptance. The other thing that you mentioned is a lot of times we feel that we don't have a choice. Like I've seen people, oh
yeah,
my God, this is the only thing I know how to do, or I don't have a choice. When you feel that you don't have a choice, you go into survival mode and you go into defensive mode. So one of the things that I do is to reframe things and help them unlock possibilities. Because the minute you have options, you
yes,
have the power of choice. And when you have the power of choice, then that way where you are, there is a path moving forward. And by the way, I tell them doing nothing is a choice, is one
yes,
choice.
yes.
Yeah,
It's so empowering at that time and uplifting to know that you have choices, even if they're not immediately
absolutely.
obvious. Going back to acceptance, because it's something I struggle with. I do accept my son's condition, but there are moments where I accept it more than others, if that doesn't sound logically coherent. How did you reach the point where you did, in your words, radically accept that you were a new person, if you like, with the tumor? Did it
Yeah.
just happen? Did you create it? Did you force it? How did it happen?
Um, I think that the way it happened for me was, I think that we all have, lower points in our lives. And for me, the lowest point in my life was when I was contemplating suicide, pretty much, and I was thinking, "Oh my God, there's nothing for me here. There's nothing going on." So I decided, I'm gonna kill myself, pretty much. And I was in my kitchen floor crying, thinking, how I was gonna do it. And all of a sudden, an image of my mother appeared in my head, and the image of my mother was the thing that saved me for one reason, because I realized that if I carry out what I was planning to do, she will suffer tremendously. That she
Yes.
will be an incredibly unhappy woman for the rest of her days here, thinking that I killed myself. And I said to myself, I cannot do that to my mother. I can't, and so I decided I'm going to get better. At that time, it wasn't about me. It was about avoiding the suffering from my mother. You see what I'm saying? So a lot of times we believe that we are the center of the universe, and we're not. So what we need to do is to find something that is bigger from us, something of significance to us, to latch to it. And to your
Okay.
point earlier, you said, your son. I mean, that's the significance. You see what I'm saying? That's
Mm.
That's what I think that we need to figure out is what are we here for?
Wow, that's incredibly profound. And there are other stories in the book which, along in your journey, because you share quite a lot of your life's journey, the moments and often the most challenging moments, as illustrations, I guess, of the thinking, and obviously informing the thinking that you shared. I mean, as you're creating the new identity for yourself and indeed for the other people that you refer to in the book and us, fear is a it often comes immediately to mind. Fearful of the unknown, what may come, and you talk about, we shouldn't be aiming to be fearless. We should fear less. So how do we reframe, I guess, or rechange to our relationship with fear in this context? What can we actually do?
Well, going back to the first step is embracing the suck. It's the same thing with fear. It's the realization that fear is we're as humans we have a very interesting relationship with fear, and fear
Mm.
can inspire us or can do the opposite, which is like retract us, and we just are afraid.
Yes.
And I think that the way I see it is that a lot of times the fear is when we are out of our comfort zone.
Mm.
We step out of a comfort zone and we're afraid of it. The way I describe in the book, by the way, resilience is a long journey. It's very long. It's the long game. So the way I describe in the book is that we don't have to be fearless, but rather expand our comfort zone. Just make sure that
Right.
we step out of our comfort zone just enough that is safe, and by doing that on a daily basis, we're simply expanding our comfort zone. You see what I'm saying? So that
I agree.
way, the fear goes away. The way I have experienced and I have told people about this is like, what is the safest thing that you can do today? Where
Mhm.
can you start? Because at the end of the day, that's all we need is to get started, to get momentum. And that momentum starts to happen. And then all of a sudden you're expanding your comfort zone little by little. So the
Yeah.
idea that I need to be fearless to conquer my fear, it is not part of what I consider the resilient paradigm, because the resilient paradigm for me is happens over time. It's a
Yes.
process of adaptation. It is a process of a slow movement.
That's so refreshing to hear. Um, you talked earlier about obviously your strong relationship with your mother in terms of that being a pivotal, I guess, grounding for yourself at that awful time in your life. And you talk about grounding, sense of purpose, sense of fulfillment. What if you're somebody who obviously understands the concept but hasn't felt it yet? They haven't done the work on it, they haven't felt it. How do you introduce them to learning more about candidly what really matters to them as a way of nurturing their resilience and
Uh,
finding those foundations?
so I again, I mean, if you think about resilience, we think we equate resilience with people that are having a hard time, a hard life. They had a brain tumor, they almost killed themselves, or they had a major accident, or they're fleeing war. I contest that that is not like that all the time. And to your question, I teach a class over at Stanford University called Interpersonal Dynamics. And there was this particular woman there that she was passionate about diversity and inclusion. I mean, she had already an incredible job doing diversity and inclusion. She had a foundation for diversity and inclusion. I mean, she was passionate about this. So I
Mm.
asked her, where does this come from? How do what is the moment for you? And her answer surprised me. And she told me that she grew up in a typical upper middle class family in the Midwest. And she decided to go to school in Chicago, which is a little bit more diverse. More people from different colors there, and she was coming from
Mm.
Midwest, and she was discriminated because she was white, and she was Christian, all of those things. And to her, that was the beginning, the genesis of her diversity and
Fascinating.
inclusion passion. And I was thinking to myself, that's it? That is the moment that changed the course of your life? And I realized at the moment that that is the same thing happens with resilience, that we don't have to go through a process of measure thing, but we need to identify a moment
You have
that
to
we will
notice it.
use,
Mm.
absolutely, that we'll use as a turning point for us.
Yeah.
And that could be anything. Like, for instance, I mean, I had a client that he was passed for promotion. And I said to him, that is the moment. What you need here is a reset. What you need here is a turning point. This is your turning point. And he said,
Mm.
yes, that's my turning point. And so that's why we do it. You see what I'm
I
saying?
get it.
Is to
Yes.
identify a moment and use it as a catalyst.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. We've implied, in, if you like, a lot about relationships, not only with yourself, but with other people around you, and nurturing relationships. I mean, it's common sense, isn't it? Good relationships, you learn from people, they give you comfort, they give you stimuli, and so forth. But how do you nurture the right type of relationships? And how do you candidly leave people behind as you're going through this long, long journey?
Yeah. Well, there are a couple of different ways that how can I answer that? But the a lot of times you want to start anything of importance without a plan. If you decide to start your business, you need to have a plan. If you're
Mm.
gonna start a major project, you need to have a plan. I think that we don't plan our lives, and one of those components of planning is the relationships that we need to have.
Mm.
So a long time ago, I decided, I was thinking, somebody asked me a question. And she said, what is, if you were giving yourself, advice to your younger self, what would it be? And I said to myself, take care of your relationships. Now, to your point, is that
Mm.
relationship is a huge bucket. You see, so what I did is I said, what are the relationships that have helped me? And then I categorized 5 relationships. The mentor, the mentee. I need to teach. If I want to get better, I need to teach it to somebody else.
Yes.
The competitor, not a person to get a person what is having, but also I can see what that person is doing, so maybe I can do it too, and potentially
Mm.
I can partner with that person. The
Yes.
partner is a person that are actually going in together and make things together and make things for us together. And finally, the last relationship is, let me see, mentor, mentee, sponsor.
Sponsor, yes.
We need to have a sponsor.
Mm.
So now, if you have that number of those buckets, then it's easy for you to start identify. I have this, I have that, I have that, I have that. If you're missing a sponsor, okay, how can I get it? You see what I'm saying? If you're missing a mentee, that's easy. Who can benefit from what I have to offer? So if you have those 5 relationships, I think that, and if you nurture them, I think that then you're going to have basically this what I call social resilience.
Yes. I love the intentionality of that. And the reason I mention it, not only because you touch on it yourself, but in many of the executives I work with, um, they have a clear sense of who they need, but they've not been conscious or intentional with nurturing those relationships. They have a lot of people around them. They're big networks. But you ask the question, who do you really need? And it's like, actually, I've just been hanging on. People have been hanging on to me, or I've been hanging on to them. So I love that intentionality. And that leads on to a related point, which is a lot of your book is about making conscious acts and sometimes small conscious acts on a daily basis and iterating and adapting, as you said. And one of those topics is setting high standards for yourself, trying to reach higher, do more, do better. How do you know how far higher to go? And the reason I ask that is I know a number of people, probably myself included sometimes, where I try and go too high, and for a number of different reasons. And actually, it can be counterproductive. But similarly, I know if I just stay as I am, I get bored, and that's not a good look either. So, and then you set yourself some very high standards professionally and personally, and you talk about your physical pursuits in the book. How do you know how far to go?
David, I think that the goal here is not realizing how far you can go, but the learning happens in the journey.
Mm,
And
mm,
what I have found myself is that I can reshape my goals. And that's the idea, is that we need to be flexible enough to see if that is the goal that we're still working on, because we're a work in progress. You see what I'm saying? And if I said, I am going to do that and I am going to focus, then you focus on the end goal rather than on the learning, rather than
yes.
on the transformation now. You see what I'm saying?
Mm,
So and
mm.
like, for instance, like I asked my, I am you probably read it, that I used to be a very long, passionate runner. I used to run lots of marathons, ultra marathons.
Unbelievable. I mean,
Uh,
I don't
and
think I've driven that far sometimes.
and I remember, when my first kid was born. And then I realized, okay, I have a choice here. If I continue doing this, I'm going to miss a lot of the times that I will love to be with my kid. So I decided, my priorities change. My priority now is my kid. And you have to be strong enough to let go of those things, because your
Yes.
priorities on life changes. So when do you need to step out and let go? Is when you decide that enough is enough. And that is up to you. You see what I'm saying?
Mm,
And
mm.
recently, I had another experience, with the book. I had like a million pieces of advice from people telling me, you should do this, you should do that, you should do that, blah, blah, blah. And I was driving me crazy. And there was a moment that I realized, okay, what is it that I want to do? And I said, I
Mm,
want to do X, Y, and Z. I'm going to do that. That's it.
mm.
So you see what I'm saying? I want to do that, rather than you need to do this, you need to do this, you need to do this. Because some goals might work at the beginning, but by no work as you evolve.
How do you, throughout what you've just said and before, there's a series of things going through my mind. There's a determination on your part, a consciousness of the choices you're making, and then really clarity on what matters to you. If you're somebody who doesn't have one or more or all of those aspects, just give them some tips. What can they do to, if you like, not be swayed by what's going on around them, and perhaps make their own decisions more consciously, more intentionally? What can they do? What would you
Well,
suggest?
I think that as I previously talked about, is resilience has a purpose. Resilience is not an umbrella for everything. You're gonna solve everything. And I
Mm.
think that I have a formula for resilience. It is commitment plus persistence time optimism. And the
Yes.
commitment is, okay, this is where I am, and I'm gonna do X. I'm gonna be committed to the X. And if you name the X, then that will allow you to prioritize and allow you to figure out how the resources that you need, the relationships that you need to build because of that particular X. Uh, the next component is persistence. And the way I describe persistence is that, David, you and I know that life is not easy. Life is hard, right? I mean, it is hard. So, but once you're committed to something, then you make the right decisions, even though they're hard. Like, my marriage is hard, but I'm committed to that marriage. Therefore, not everything that is happening in our marriage is flowers and roses, but I'm committed to the woman that I marry. Therefore, everything that I do, even though might be uncomfortable, I'm committed to that.
Mm.
And the final is the optimism. The optimism is like, gosh, and I put it at commitment time plus persistence times optimism. And the why I see optimism as a multiplier, because if you don't have optimism, there is
Yes.
zero resilience.
Yes.
So when I
Yes.
think about, the optimism, it's like, I mean, we're going to, cannot wait for, my kids to go to college, cannot wait for my kids to become, the human that we hope that they become. That is the optimism. So that allows me to keep the commitment and do the things that I need to do in order to make them hard. So again, going back to your question, when my client says, gosh, I just got pass for promotion. All right, let's make a commitment. The commitment for you is to grow and be strong. And next year, you're going to be ready for when the promotion cycle comes. You're ready for that. Yes. Are you committed to that? Yes. Okay. So now let's get to work. So I think that is identifying what you want to get good at and go after it.
And the great thing there, and your book is not only stimulating, but it is uplifting, because you identify so many moments in our lives where we can make choices, not only identify them, but make choices and do things that matter to us and the people that we love and work with consciously, and iterate and learn, as opposed to it being one big dramatic thing and then you're sort of
Right.
set for the next X number of years. I think one thing I'm struck by is you've gone through a number of hardships in your life, and I wonder how you still keep a sense of compassion for others. Perhaps you do because of it. When you hear other stories, whether in your personal, professional life, and they say, "Oh, I'm struggling with this is difficult," and it's like, gee, compared to what I've gone through, wow, you've gone through nothing. And the reason I ask that is, in a number of professional settings, there are a number of individuals who've, perhaps older individuals who've gone through that. I've gone through the hard yards of X, and frankly, you'd think they would be more compassionate, but actually they treat the people that come after them with less compassion because they sort of think they need to earn it. So it's a personal question to you, Luis, which is, how do you maintain a sense of compassion for people as you learn more about their stories, which candidly may at face value not be as difficult or as challenging as your own?
I hear what you're saying, and I think that there is a lot of people that have a lot of privilege, including myself, and how I am more compassionate is I realize and acknowledge the privilege that I have.
Mm-hmm.
So give me an example. I remember, when my kids were like tiny and we changing the diapers, I don't want to change the diapers. That stinks, oh my God, I don't want to do that. And then I realized one day, and I said, you know what? Changing this diaper of my child is a privilege, because many parents, many fathers cannot do that. And that changed my perception. Is that? So sometimes I go and say, oh, what am I going to eat? Blah, blah, blah. And open the refrigerator. Oh my God, there is so much food there. And my reframe is like thinking back that there are other people that are less fortunate and less privileged than me. So that particular completely changed my perception of, oh my gosh, I have it good. Now, how do I do with these people? With you mentioned, that especially, oh, I've done this, I've done that. Absolutely. But that doesn't guarantee you being the asshole that you are. What I'm saying to them is like, listen, that is a privilege. How are you going to use that privilege? That the privilege of you have gone through this, that you have so much to give it to people, mentor, like help others, because there is a lot of more. Going back to what you mentioned is what I mentioned earlier is about the idea of having a fulfilled life and having, a purpose. And sometimes all I need to do with these people is to give them a purpose.
Mm-hmm.
I'll give you an example. I was coaching this. I think that I have this in the book. It's a CTO, and he was from Eastern Europe. He was an older gentleman, ex-military. And this guy barked orders like you have no idea, and everybody was scared of hell. Him.
Right.
People were quitting for him. So when they got me in, was with the idea that he was putting the company at a liability. So as we were having a conversation, I asked him, what do you want to be known for? What do you want once you leave this organization? What do you want to be known for? And he said, well, I want to be known for two things. I want to be known because I made this company successful, and I want to be known as a great mentor that I could be. And I said, oh, you want to be a great mentor? All right. So let's grab that, because if that's what you want to be, what you're doing is not aligned with mentoring.
Yes.
So it's like, and I said to him, so now what we need to do is you don't need to stop doing what you do, but you need to position it differently. So the way he will come and start screaming orders, now he will say, listen, I believe in you. I know that you can do this. I push you because you know that you can, you can, yeah, blah, 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 blah. You see what I'm saying? So he positioned that. And then all of a sudden, people started taking the same thing that he was doing earlier. But now his intention was elevating them. So his behavior was much, much more accepted. So going back to your question, I think that all we need to have is the why. Why are we doing what we're doing?
Yeah. And then, as you've skillfully done, channeling it
I
in the
know,
right way to the right
absolutely.
people. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, one thing I'm struck by in your book is you have a number of not only very moving stories of yourself, very clear frameworks, also some wonderful phrases. And I quote, you talk about when we flex our resilient muscles, we learn how to embrace the beautiful beings that we are. And a very beautiful phrase, and I completely agree with it. Um, let's talk about you a bit more. You're a beautiful human being, full of wisdom and generosity. What is your superpower, and where do you apply it day in, day out?
Uh, I mean, so a few years ago, I was reading the book Start with Why by Simon Sinek. Do you remember? I don't know if you've seen it.
Yeah.
And so I decided, I'm going to do that myself. I'm going to figure out what is my why. What is it that I do? What is my why? Why do I do the things that I do? And so, I ended up hiring one of Simon Sinek's consultants, and he took me to this journey of finding my why. And it turns out that my why is the following: is that I reframe the important moments so we can adapt and thrive. Let me rephrase that. I reframe the important moments so we can adapt and thrive. And how I came out to be is I remember, my very first memory. Literally my first memory when I was a child is, as I mentioned earlier, my dad was a truck driver, and he will go on trips for 3 or 4 days sometimes, and I was very attached to him. And so whenever he will go, I will be, sad and crying. But the moment when he will leave, it was it was hard for me. So he invented this game of hide and seek, hide and seek. And so every time that he needed to be on the road, he was okay, let's play hide and seek, and then he will pretend that he was hiding, and I will go and try to find him, and he will go to do his thing. The next day, I will go look for him. The second day, like I keep looking for him, but in the back of my mind, I knew that he was gone.
Yes, yes.
That was the first memory. I did the same with my brothers and sisters as well. As I mentioned, at the beginning, it was something that, that we didn't have enough money to go around. Sometimes we will have a meal for a little thing for 5 of us. So I will reframe it. Let's pretend that this is this. Let's pretend that that is that. Moving forward, now I realized that was a coping mechanism for me,
Yes,
reframing
yes.
things, but I realized that became a superpower, because now that's what I do. I reframe things for people so they can see things differently, so they can think differently, and therefore they can act differently.
What a
So
superpower.
going back to the superpower, I think that my superpower to your is to reframing. But if I ask my clients what is the one thing that I do that they feel that is a superpower, sometimes it's not that. Sometimes it's like,
Yes.
somebody said, you de-escalate like a mofo. Somebody said you're a deep thinker. So it doesn't matter what it is, but you need to know something that you do well so you can do more of.
Yeah, it can
So
be
two
it
things.
can be your anchor. Yeah, it can be your anchor around
Absolutely.
things.
Two things you
Yeah.
need to, I needed to understand what I did when I was a kid, but also understand what people perceive that I do well. And that's what we don't do enough.
Yes.
That's what
Yeah.
people don't do enough, is ask, what is it that I do well so I can do more of that?
Yes. Yes. So continuing on you, what are you working on the most at the moment in terms of your own development? Maybe about your mindset, maybe a skill, a practice. What are you working on? Just pick one.
But I wasn't expecting that question, to tell you the truth. What am I working on? I guess there are two things here. I wanna continue being a better human and a better father and husband. So
Excellent.
those are the two things that I feel that there's a never ending battle. I have to
Wonderful.
continue that, and the reason why is because I do want to grow to kids that are strong, confident, resilient, and kind. So everything that I do is goes through that mission. So
Wonderful. Wonderful.
that is the key, because then I use that as an anchor, as you mentioned, and then I can read more. I can learn more. I can do things because the anchor is my kids at the moment.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. And then the last question: when you're having your absolutely best day, you're smashing it out of the park, work is just flowing, you're top form. What are the practices, your habits, day in day out, that most help you to do that?
I'm a runner. I love to run, and I think that I use running as my reward for things that I do well. So
Reward.
uh, I I I read this book. Oh my God, what was the name? Never mind. But the concept is the following: is that we have to have some things that lift us up every day, and for me, running is one thing. I mean, if I do well today, I reward myself by going for a run.
Wow, that's very interesting. How you reward yourself. A 10K run rather than a 100K these
But
days?
sometimes it's like 6 miles. Sometimes it's, on the weekends it could be up to 18 miles.
Wow.
But
That's a reward. That's
that's
fascinating.
that's my reward. But I call it my reward because my wife tells me, go exercise because you're a better husband when you're tired. So it has a dual. I go there, and when I go in, some people journal, some people meditate. I go run. When I
Good
run,
for
I
you.
am just with myself, and I think about the problems of the world and things that I have to solve for myself. And when I come back, and I have clarity. So
Yeah.
so running is my reward.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Luis, you have produced, not only in your book, but all of your work, some really thoughtful, meaningful, very practical insights that will enhance the lives of many, many people professionally and personally. You're a very eloquent, generous, uh, beautiful human being. And I've
Oh,
learned a lot from knowing you over the coming months. And that was a wonderful conversation, which I'm very grateful for. Where can people find out more about your work online? Where should they go and find you?
well, the first thing is, my website is velascoaching.com. LinkedIn, of course. I hope that you can put a link to my LinkedIn profile there, and
Of
I
course, yeah.
answer every single email that I get about resilience, the book, anything. So people should just write, and knowing that I will answer. And I I've been fortunate to be a contributor at HBR. So there are some articles on HBR as well there that they can read and contact me through the links
Very
provided.
good. Very good. Well, I love that conversation. Lots of insights, even more having read the book a number of times, even more from this conversation I'm going to take away to use at work and at home and for my own self. So thank you for that conversation.
David, thank you so much. I really appreciate you having me in this podcast. So thank you. I appreciate it.
Wonderful. That was another edition of Lancefield on the Line. I do hope you enjoyed this episode as much as I did. Please do check out the other episodes in this series. Sign up to the YouTube channel, to the podcast, give us a nice rating. And Luis, thank you ever so much again.
Thank you, my friend.